The story opens with a large, old mansion-style house. It stands far from the city, in a quiet and isolated area. A small family of 4 moves in: Brian, his wife Kiara, and their 2 children, Eli and Stephen. The house looks grand but is clearly very old. Brian had managed to buy the property at a surprisingly low price, so he was thrilled. The rest of the family was also excited seeing the place. But Eli, the older daughter, felt something was off from the very first moment. She wasn't comfortable there at all, and she badly missed her friends and their old home. While everyone was busy setting up their belongings, Eli noticed an old, shut door. She asked her father where it led. Brian told her it was the basement, a place they could use to store extra and unwanted stuff. Curious about what lay inside, Eli stepped forward and pushed the basement door open. The moment it opened, a strong gust of cold air rushed out, followed by a strange, unpleasant smell. Ahead were old wooden stairs, creaking and worn, descending into deep darkness below. It was so dark that nothing could be seen clearly down there. Then something startling happened. Everyone else stepped back out, but Eli remained inside. At that very moment, the heavy basement door slammed shut on its own with a loud bang. Eli panicked badly and began screaming. Brian stood outside, pushing the door with all his strength, but it simply wouldn't budge. Meanwhile, inside, Eli sensed that something was climbing up the stairs toward her. She could clearly hear slow, steady footsteps, as if someone was quietly making their way up, one step at a time. Her terror grew, and she screamed even louder than before. Outside, a frantic Brian looked around desperately. Then he spotted an old key hanging near the door. Without wasting a second, he grabbed it and unlocked the door with trembling hands. The moment it swung open, an angry Eli stormed out and went straight to her room. From that point on, Eli completely lost any comfort she had with the house. It no longer just felt strange, it felt dangerous. A short while later, Kiara came to her and explained that she and Brian had to step out for an urgent business meeting. She gave Eli the responsibility of feeding Stephen, putting him to sleep, and then locking up the house properly before going to bed herself. With that, both parents left. As the night grew darker, a heavy silence fell over the entire house. Sitting alone, Eli called her boyfriend and began crying, complaining that her parents were careless and never made time for her. She said that even when they were around, she felt completely alone. Then, behind her, a door slowly began to creak open. Eli didn't notice the sound at first, but when she glanced back, she saw a figure wearing a horrifying mask standing there. She nearly leapt out of her skin in fear. But the figure burst out laughing. It was only her younger brother Stephen, who had put on the mask to prank her. Eli was furious. She immediately called Kiara and reported that Stephen was playing video games instead of sleeping and was bothering her. Kiara scolded Stephen firmly over the phone and warned him that if he didn't go to sleep right away, his games would be taken away for good. That threat worked, and Stephen quietly agreed to go to bed. After hanging up, Eli asked Stephen where he had found that strange mask. He took her to a neglected corner of the house that was in very poor condition, scattered with old, broken items covered in thick dust. There, among the clutter, they discovered an old gramophone. Curious, they decided to play it. But instead of music, it produced the recorded voice of a man, a professor of some sort, reciting what sounded like a strange formula. Then the voice suddenly began counting, 1, 2, 3. The moment the count ended, all the lights in the house started flickering rapidly, and at the same time, a low but deeply unsettling moan drifted in from the direction of the basement. Frightened, Eli quickly switched off the gramophone, grabbed Stephen's hand, and hurried to her room. But just moments later, the entire house lost power. Total darkness swept through every corner. A scared Eli immediately called Kiara and explained everything. Kiara calmly told her not to panic and instructed her to go down to the basement and check the switchboard. Eli firmly refused. She told her mother she was not going anywhere near that dark place. Kiara reasoned with her, saying that if the power stayed out, Stephen would get even more frightened and cause chaos throughout the house. Reluctantly, Eli lit a candle and made her way with shaking steps to the basement door. She opened it and stared down at the stairs below. Her heart was pounding, and out of fear, she hadn't ended the call with Kiara. A strange feeling came over her, as though something below was waiting for her. Over the phone, Kiara encouraged her, telling her to be brave and take it one step at a time, even counting each step if it helped ease her fear. Eli placed her first trembling foot on the stairs. She was so terrified that tears began rolling down her cheeks. She felt as though, in the darkness, something was breathing softly right beside her. When she reached the 9th step, she noticed something odd below and hesitated briefly. Then, summoning her courage, she shut her eyes and placed her foot on the 10th step. On the phone, Kiara felt a brief moment of relief, thinking Eli had safely made it to the bottom. But then she heard something over the call that made her mind go blank with horror. Eli was still counting, and she wasn't stopping. Kiara's heart sank. She had clearly seen with her own eyes that the basement had only 10 steps. She panicked and called out to Eli, asking which step she was on now, since there were only 10. But there was no reply from Eli, just the sound of counting, going on and on. In a panic, Kiera and Brian rushed back home. The moment they arrived, they went straight to the basement, turned on the light, and looked around. But what they found left them completely stunned. The basement was totally empty. There was no trace of Eli anywhere, as though she had never been there at all. They immediately called the police. Every room and corner of the house was searched and called out to. But no sign of Eli was found. The following day, a search operation was launched through the dense forest surrounding the area. Still, no clue turned up. After this, Kiera completely fell apart. She lived in a state of shock, and her daily routine crumbled. Brian tried to reassure her, suggesting that perhaps Eli had disliked the house and simply run off somewhere. But Kiera was absolutely certain that what had happened was not normal. She remembered clearly how Eli had been counting while descending, moving further and further towards somewhere unknown. Days passed. Kiera visited the police station, where the officer informed her that Eli's face had not appeared on any CCTV footage, at any airport, or at any bus stop. Kiera then demanded a forensic investigation of the house, particularly the basement. The officer initially refused, but her persistence wore him down and he agreed. On the way back home, Kiera's eyes landed on the old nameplate fixed to the house. Something about it unsettled her. She searched the name online, and what she discovered made the ground feel like it had vanished beneath her feet. The name was linked to a terrifying demon, one believed to be the guardian of the gates of hell. To find out more, she asked Stephen what else had happened that night. After thinking for a moment, Stephen recalled that just before Eli disappeared, they had played the old gramophone in the basement, and the moment it started, the lights had begun to flicker. This deepened Kiera's suspicion considerably. She then took a UV light and slowly made her way into the basement. As she shone it across the stairs, something strange revealed itself. Each step had a Roman numeral written on it. She carefully descended further. When she reached the 10th step, she found an unusual formula etched into the surface, as if someone had deliberately hidden it there. This discovery only deepened her unease. Now she was becoming certain that the basement was concealing something that couldn't be seen with ordinary eyes. She then swept the UV light across all the walls. For a few moments, nothing appeared. Then, as the light reached one corner, a chilling sight emerged. An enormous number of human skull marks, drawn in what appeared to be blood, glowing back at her. The scene was so horrifying that Kiera screamed involuntarily. It was now clear that the basement was hiding something deep and dangerous. Shortly after, the forensic team arrived. After completing their investigation, the officer told her that the marks were not made in blood, they were simply ordinary paint. He also mentioned that the house had been built in 1950, and since then, reports of strange occurrences had continued to surface over the years. Brian and Kiera had bought the property purely because of its low price. But now, they were beginning to understand just how heavy a price that decision had cost them. As time passed, Kiera's condition continued to worsen. She was consumed by thoughts of Eli at every moment and blamed herself endlessly, wishing she had given her children more of her time. Then one night, while she was listening to an old voice recording of Eli, she began hearing a faint whispering from one side. It seemed to come from near the wash basin at first, then gradually appeared to move closer to the basement. The voice was exactly like Eli's, and it kept repeating the same count, over and over. She followed the voice to the basement door. Deep darkness lay beyond it. Just then, one of Stephen's balls rolled and struck her foot, bouncing down the stairs. Normally, it should have stopped after the 10th step. But it kept going, the sound echoing continuously, as though the ball was falling into a bottomless pit. Startled, Kiera quickly switched on the light. When the brightness spread, only the same normal 10 steps stood before her. The next morning, Brian noticed Kiera staring carefully at the house's doors. She told him that each door had different symbols on it, and those symbols were pointing to a hidden secret within the house. Brian didn't take it seriously. He assumed that the shock of Eli's disappearance had affected her thinking, so he dismissed the matter and left for the office. But Kiera was now fully convinced that every wall, every door, and every marking in the house was pointing toward a much larger truth. To get to the bottom of it, she photographed all the strange symbols on the doors and sent them to a colleague at her workplace. A little while later, she received word that the symbols were written in the Hebrew language. When all the symbols were combined and interpreted together, they were found to be connected to a terrifying demon from the Bible, Leviathan, known as the keeper of the gates of hell. This revelation deepened both her fear and her suspicion further. Then she recalled what her son had mentioned, that before Eli disappeared, a mysterious recording of a man's voice had been playing on the music player. To make sense of this connection, she decided to play the recording again. The moment it began and the sound of counting filled the house, her son put down his toys and began repeating the numbers out loud along with it. He moved slowly and steadily in the direction of the spot where they had first found the gramophone. Witnessing this, Kiera immediately stopped the recording and grabbed her son. Within moments, he returned to normal. When asked what he had been doing, he had no memory of it whatsoever, neither where he had been going nor what he had been doing moments before. This shook Kiera to her core. At that same moment, her eyes fell on an old photograph hanging on the wall. It was of the man who had previously lived in this house, a mathematics teacher by profession. Kiera took the photo down and turned it over. Written on the back were more words in that same unknown script. She was now increasingly certain that all of these things were connected. She searched the internet for information about the teacher. What she found revealed that after he had moved into the house with his family, one day his entire family had vanished without a trace. The disappearance remained an unsolved mystery to this day, with no clues ever found. However, she also learned that one of his daughters had survived and was still alive. She was still going through this information when suddenly the power in the entire house went out again. In the darkness, she heard her son's voice coming from the direction of the basement. She ran toward it immediately. When she got there, the basement door was closed. She tried to find the key but couldn't locate it anywhere. She bent down and peered through the keyhole. From inside, a terrifying eye, demonic in appearance, stared back at her. She recoiled in horror. Then, out of nowhere, her son appeared behind her and asked what she was doing there. Kiera told him she had come because she heard him calling out from inside. But her son told her he had been in his room the whole time and had made no sound. It became clear that the mysterious voice had been heard only by Kiera. Then, without warning, the basement door swung open on its own, and the lights came back on at the same time. The key turned up shortly after. Kiera felt a moment of calm, thinking things had settled down. She opened the basement door and stepped inside. But the moment she entered, the door slammed shut behind her and locked itself. She called out to her son standing outside to open it, but he couldn't reach the key. He ran to get a chair. Inside, Kiera felt a growing presence, the same unsettling sensation Eli had experienced. In her panic, her phone slipped from her hand and fell. Then her husband arrived just in time, and somehow forced the door open and pulled her out. Once outside, Kiera told him everything, the strange presence she had felt in the basement, the door locking on its own, and the information she had discovered about the previous owner. She explained that the mathematics teacher who had once lived in this house had also lost his entire family to a sudden disappearance, exactly as had happened with their daughter Eli. But her husband still refused to believe it. He called it the effect of fear and confusion. Yet Kiera held her ground. Seeing her determination, Brian went into the basement to investigate himself. There he found a clump of animal hair. He considered it nothing unusual, ignored it, and came back out. The following day, Kiera visited the large mathematics college where the former owner of the house had once taught. There she met a professor who was conducting research on ancient mathematical theories. Kiera showed him the strange formula she had found on the 10th step of the basement. The professor examined it closely and became visibly serious. He explained that this was not a simple mathematical equation, it was an extremely old mathematical solution, one linked to specific geometric patterns and mysterious calculations. He went on to say that according to long-held beliefs, such formulas were not used merely for computation but to open a doorway into another world entirely. This confirmed what had already been growing in Kiera's mind. She then asked in detail about the mathematics teacher who had previously lived in her house. The professor, in a grave tone, told her that the man had disappeared under deeply mysterious circumstances, and that his disappearance remained completely unsolved to this day, with no trace ever found. He did mention, however, that the teacher's daughter was still alive. The moment Kiera heard this, she felt that this woman could be the final missing piece to the mystery. She immediately obtained her address and went to see her. The elderly woman, with a heavy heart, shared her story. She said that years ago, her brother had suddenly fallen severely ill. His condition worsened day by day. The family tried every possible treatment, but no doctor could identify the illness. The continuous failure and despair broke her father's faith in God. Gradually, his belief shifted away from faith and moved toward dark superstition. Eventually, he made the decision to seek the help of a demonic force, believing it might be the only thing that could save his son. In this search, he came across that same mysterious formula, said to be capable of opening the gates of hell. Her father used it to open that gateway, so that the demon could enter their world and cure his son. The demon came, but it deceived them. Instead of healing her brother, it dragged the entire family down with it into hell. She alone had somehow managed to escape. She then gave Kiera a stern and grave warning, that the house was not only dangerous in the basement. The entire house was a gateway to hell. Through it, the demon could enter their world at any moment. This deeply frightened Kiera. When she returned home, she told her husband everything in full detail, the mysterious formula, the former owner's past, and the old woman's warning. This time, Brian did not brush it off. He closely examined all the strange markings on the doors and tried to piece them together. When all the symbols were combined, they began forming a distinct shape. Together, they formed what looked like a star. When he researched that symbol, the information revealed that it was the mark of the very same dangerous demon, the one believed to guard the gates of hell. Now both of them fully understood, the markings on the walls and doors were not decorative. They were part of a dark, demonic structure. Kiera was now absolutely certain that this house was truly a gateway to hell and had become the pathway through which the demon operated. To confirm the truth one final time, she played the counting recording on the music player once more. As it started and the sound of counting echoed through the house, the atmosphere instantly became heavy and ominous. At that very moment, the basement door swung open on its own. Their son fell under an unseen force again and began repeating the numbers without stopping, slowly drifting toward the basement stairs. A short while later, his voice went completely silent. Alarmed, the couple searched desperately for him. They finally found him, but he looked terrifyingly weak. They quickly brought him to his room. That was when Kiera noticed that on her son's chest, the star-shaped symbol, the mark of that demonic force, had appeared. At that same moment, she heard her husband's voice from the other room. She went in and found him standing in a strange, rigid posture, counting aloud. When he finished counting to 10, he said, "It has arrived." At that instant, the basement door burst open, and a horrifying figure emerged. If you enjoy movie breakdowns like this, click the subscribe button. I post recaps like this every week. The head of a goat, large curved horns, and jagged, crooked teeth. Its form was utterly terrifying. Kiera froze in fear at the sight of it. She desperately tried to find somewhere to hide. But the entity seemed to sense her presence. It began moving toward her slowly. Just before it could reach her, Kiera gathered whatever courage she had and ran. She sprinted directly toward the basement. But the scene there had changed completely. The stairs now stretched far deeper than before, longer and darker than she had ever seen, as though they descended into an endless void. Despite her fear, she kept going down. At the bottom, she found a strange door. Without pausing, she went through it. What lay on the other side was terrifying. A vast, dark expanse stretched out before her. Many people were lined up in a row, walking forward while repeating the counting in unison. Their faces and expressions had changed, they seemed hollow and empty. Among them, Kiera spotted her daughter Eli, also moving with the group, chanting the numbers in rhythm. Kiera rushed toward her immediately. She grabbed her hand and pulled her away from the line, running back the way she had come. In the chaos and urgency, her torch slipped from her hand and clattered to the ground. She didn't stop to pick it up. Holding tightly to Eli, she ran toward the door and somehow made it back into the house. The moment she stepped back in, the lights were on and her husband and son looked completely normal, as if nothing had ever happened. For just a moment, she felt relief. She believed she had truly brought her daughter back from that dreadful place. But fear still gripped her. Without hesitation, she told everyone they had to leave the house immediately, to get away from this cursed place forever. But as she reached for the front door to leave, she noticed her torch lying right there beside it, the same one she had dropped and left behind in that other world. She couldn't understand how that was possible. At that very moment, her daughter, husband, and son all stiffened and began counting again in that same eerie rhythm. And then she understood. They had never left that place at all. Just like the teacher and his family before them, Kiera's family was now trapped in hell. And slowly, helplessly, Kiera too began to count along with them. The final image is of the house, once a family home, now fully consumed by darkness, an eternal doorway to hell. And on that haunting note, the story ends.